The stars had never looked so cold to Captain Elena Vasquez. She stood on the bridge of her ship, the UES Ironclad, and watched through the main viewport as alien vessels surrounded her. There were 40 of them, 40 sleek, beautiful warships that seemed to glow with inner light. Their hulls were smooth and perfect, without a single scratch or mark. They looked like they had never seen battle. The Ironclad was different. She was old. She was tired. Her gray hull carried the scars of 100 fights across 60 years of service. Patches of welded metal covered holes that had once been made by missiles and railgun fire. Her paint had faded long ago, and rust spots appeared in places that the maintenance crews could never quite fix. She creaked and groaned as she moved, like an old soldier whose bones ached in the cold. But she was still here, still fighting, still alive. The Galactic Concord had called this meeting. Representatives from 100 different alien species had gathered at this space station to watch humanity take its first step into the larger universe. Earth had finally developed faster-than-light travel, and now the galaxy wanted to see what kind of people humans really were. The Valkyrie Dominion had demanded that Earth send its finest warship. They said it was tradition. They said it was a show of respect. Captain Vasquez knew it was really a test. The Valkyrie wanted to see how strong humanity was. They wanted to know if humans were worth respecting or if they could be pushed around. Earth had chosen to send the Ironclad. Some people back home had complained about this choice. They said Earth should send one of its newer ships, something shiny and impressive that would make the aliens take humanity seriously. But Admiral Chen had overruled them all. He said the Ironclad represented what humanity truly was. Not perfect, not pretty, but strong, unbreakable, a survivor. Captain Vasquez had served on the Ironclad for 22 years. She had started as a young lieutenant, fresh from the academy, full of dreams and fears. She had fought in the Martian Rebellion, when the colonies tried to break away from Earth. She had survived the Belt Wars, when pirates and corporate armies turned the asteroid belt into a killing ground. She had been there during the desperate defense of Europa, when enemy forces had outnumbered them 10-1. Every battle had left its mark on her ship, and every battle had left its mark on her crew. The men and women who served aboard the Ironclad were not young. They were not fresh or eager. They were veterans, every single one of them. Some had gray hair. Some had scars that no doctor could fully heal. Some had eyes that had seen too much death and could never quite forget it. But they were the best crew in the entire Earth fleet. Not because they were the smartest or the fastest, but because they had survived things that would have broken anyone else. They knew how to fight when everything was against them. They knew how to win when winning seemed impossible. The communication screen on the bridge flickered to life. An alien face appeared, belonging to a creature that looked somewhat like a tall, thin insect with multiple eyes that glittered like black diamonds. This was High Admiral Zeth Karan, the commander of the Valkyrie fleet. He looked at the Ironclad through the screen, and he began to laugh. It was a strange sound, clicking and harsh, but there was no mistaking what it was. He was laughing at them, laughing at their ship, laughing at humanity itself. "This is what Earth sends to represent its military power?" Zeth Karan said, his voice carrying clear amusement. "This broken, primitive vessel? This museum piece held together by welded metal and desperate hope?" His words were broadcast on the open diplomatic channel. Every alien species watching could hear him. Every representative from every world was listening as the High Admiral of the Valkyrie mocked Earth's chosen warship. "I have commanded fleets for 300 of your Earth years," Zeth Karan continued. "I have conquered 17 species and brought them under Valkyrie rule. Never in all that time have I seen something so pathetic attempt to call itself a warship." On the bridge of the Ironclad, no one spoke. The crew sat at their stations, their faces calm and empty. They had heard words like this before, from Martian rebels who thought Earth was weak, from belt pirates who thought they were easy prey, from every enemy who had looked at the Ironclad and seen only an old, tired ship instead of the warrior she truly was. Lieutenant Commander James Park, the tactical officer, glanced at Captain Vasquez. His hand rested near the weapons controls, ready to bring the ship's systems online at her command. But she shook her head slightly. Not yet. "Look at those weapon systems," Zeth Karan said, still broadcasting to the galaxy. "Kinetic railguns, primitive chemical missiles. They fight with weapons our ancestors abandoned thousands of years ago. They throw rocks and fire, like animals. More laughter came from the other Velkari ships. Captain Vasquez could see their vessels moving closer, surrounding the ironclad on all sides. They were showing off their numbers, their power, their complete dominance of the situation. Chief Engineer Sofia Rodriguez's voice came through the internal comm system. Captain, they're scanning us. Deep scans. They're looking at everything. Our weapons, our engines, our hull composition. Let them look, Vasquez replied quietly. Let them see whatever they want to see. She knew what they would find. They would find a ship built from simple steel alloys instead of the regenerative smart metals that alien vessels used. They would find fusion reactors that were 60 years old, patched and repaired so many times that hardly any original parts remain. They would find weapons that were brutal and simple, designed not for elegance, but for reliability. What they would not find was fear. High Admiral Zethkaran leaned closer to his camera, his many eyes focusing on Captain Vasquez through the screen. I almost feel sorry for you, human. You have traveled so far, only to learn how small you truly are. Your species has spirit. We Velkari can respect that. But spirit is not enough. Not against us. Captain Vasquez finally spoke. Her voice was calm and steady, carrying no anger and no fear. Just simple, quiet confidence. Is there something you want, High Admiral? Or did you call just to hear yourself talk? The laughter stopped. Zethkaran's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, something like surprise flickered across his alien face. He was not used to being spoken to this way, not by conquered species, not by anyone. Bold words, he said slowly. Let us see if your actions match them. He ended the transmission. The screen went dark. Captain Vasquez turned to face her crew. 57 men and women looked back at her, waiting for her orders, waiting for her to tell them what came next. Maintain position, she said. Let them laugh. Let them think whatever they want to think. She looked out the viewport at the gleaming Velkari fleet, and she allowed herself a small, cold smile. They'll learn. The diplomatic summit took place on the space station at the center of the gathering. Representatives from dozens of alien species sat in a great circular chamber, watching as humanity's ambassador presented Earth's case for joining the Galactic Concord. Captain Vasquez was not there. She remained on the ironclad, watching the proceedings through a video feed. She had never been good at politics. Her job was to protect the people who were. Ambassador David Chen was a patient man. He had spent his entire career learning how to talk to people who did not want to listen. He spoke calmly and clearly about Earth's desire for peaceful trade, cultural exchange, and mutual cooperation. He talked about humanity's achievements in science and art. He offered friendship to any species willing to accept it. The Valkyrie representative listened with obvious boredom. When Ambassador Chen finished speaking, the alien rose from his seat and addressed the chamber. Humanity's words are pleasant, he said, but words mean nothing. What matters is power, and humanity has no power here. He pressed a button on his console, and holographic images appeared above the center of the chamber. They showed the Velkari Dominion's territory, a vast empire spanning hundreds of star systems. They showed their fleets, thousands of warships patrolling their borders. They showed their conquered worlds, once proud civilizations now serving the Dominion. The Velkari have protected this region of space for 10,000 years, the representative continued. We have brought order to chaos, peace to war, civilization to barbarism. Every species that has joined us has prospered under our guidance. Ambassador Chen remained calm. We appreciate the Velkari's offer of friendship, but Earth prefers to remain independent. We wish to be partners, not subjects. A murmur ran through the chamber. Several alien representatives exchanged worried glances. They knew what was coming. They had seen it before. The Velkari representative smiled, showing rows of small, sharp teeth. That is not one of the choices available to you. Back on the ironclad, Captain Vasquez felt her stomach tighten. She had suspected this from the beginning. The Velkari had not come to welcome humanity into the galaxy. They had come to conquer them. The representative's voice turned cold and hard. Earth will join the Dominion as a client state. You will provide resources, labor, and military support as we require. Your fleet will serve under Velkari command. Your people will follow Velkari law. And if we refuse, Ambassador Chen asked quietly, then we will make an example of you. Starting with that pathetic ship floating outside the station. The feed cut out. A moment later, Captain Vasquez's communication screen lit up with an incoming transmission from High Admiral Zethkaran's flagship. She accepted the call. The High Admiral's face appeared, no longer amused. His expression was cold and businesslike, the look of someone who had done this many times before and expected no difficulty. Captain Vasquez, he said, by now you understand the situation. Your government will submit to the Dominion, or your species will face destruction. It is a simple choice. It's not my choice to make, Vasquez replied. I'm just a ship captain. No, you are the symbol of human resistance. That old, broken ship of yours represents everything your people believe about themselves. That is why we demanded you bring it. And that is why we will destroy it if you do not surrender. He leaned forward, his many eyes fixed on her face. I offer you this chance out of respect for your courage. Surrender the ironclad. Order your crew to abandon ship. We will take you prisoner and treat you well. Your ambassador will then recommend that Earth accept our terms. The transition will be peaceful. No one else needs to die. Captain Vasquez looked at her crew. Lieutenant Commander Park sat at tactical, his jaw tight with anger. Chief Engineer Rodriguez stood near the engineering station, her arms crossed. Around the bridge, 57 faces watched her, waiting. None of them looked afraid. None of them looked ready to give up. And if I refuse? She asked. Zethkaran's voice grew colder. Then I will destroy your ship piece by piece. I will disable your engines first so you cannot run, then your weapons so you cannot fight, then your life support, slowly so you can feel yourselves dying. The galaxy will watch as I take apart everything you are, and they will remember the price of defying the Dominion. The threat hung in the air between them. Captain Vasquez knew he meant every word. The Velkari had done this before. They had broken rebellions and crushed resistance across hundreds of worlds. They knew exactly how to make an example of someone, but she also knew something that Zethkaran did not. She knew what the ironclad was made of. Admiral, she said slowly, I've served on this ship for 22 years. I've fought battles you can't imagine against enemies you've never faced. I've watched friends die and buried them in the void. I've held this ship together with spare parts and prayer when any sane person would have given up. She stood up from her captain's chair, her eyes locked on the screen. This ship is my home. This crew is my family. And I do not surrender my home or my family to anyone. Not to pirates, not to rebels, not to you. Zethkaran's eyes narrowed. You cannot possibly win. 40 ships against one. You will die for nothing. Maybe, Vasquez admitted, but we won't die easy, and we won't die alone. She cut the transmission and turned to her crew. All hands, battle stations. The words echoed through the ship's intercom system, reaching every corner of the ironclad. In the engine room, Chief Rodriguez began bringing the fusion reactors to full power. In the weapons bays, crews loaded railgun ammunition and armed missile launchers. In the medical bay, Dr. Hassan prepared for casualties he hoped would never come. Throughout the ship, men and women who had spent their lives fighting moved with calm efficiency. They had done this before. They knew what was coming, and they were ready. On the bridge, Lieutenant Commander Park reported from his station. All weapons online, Captain. Targeting systems ready. Point defense active. Engineering reports full power available. Rodriguez's voice came through the comm. The old girl's ready to run. Captain Vasquez settled back into her chair and watched through the viewport as the Velkari fleet began to move into attack formation. 40 beautiful, deadly ships, their weapons charging with energy that glowed like captured stars. She reached for the communication controls and opened a channel to High Admiral Zethkaran. She had one last message for him. You asked what happens if I refuse your offer. Here's your answer. She took a breath. Come and take her then. She closed the channel and nodded to her helmsman. Engines ready. All power to shields. The ironclad's old engines roared to life, and 60 years of battle experience prepared to meet 10,000 years of arrogance. The first shots of humanity's introduction to the galaxy were about to be fired. The Velkari fleet opened fire at exactly the same moment. It was beautiful in a terrible way. 40 ships released streams of bright blue plasma that curved through space like ribbons of lightning. The attack was coordinated perfectly, designed to hit the ironclad from every direction at once. There would be no escape, no defense, just instant destruction. That was what should have happened. Instead, the ironclad moved. She was not graceful. She did not dance through the attack like the sleek Velkari ships could. She lurched and rolled like a wounded animal, her old engines screaming with effort they were never designed to produce. Warning lights flashed across every console on the bridge. The ship's frame groaned under forces that threatened to tear her apart. But she survived. The plasma streams missed their target by meters, some by centimeters. A few struck glancing blows against the ironclad's hull, but her thick armor absorbed what her shields could not deflect. Smoke and sparks erupted from damaged systems, but nothing critical failed. High Admiral Zeth Karan watched from his flagship with growing confusion. His tactical officers reported the same thing he was seeing with his own eyes. The human ship had dodged an attack that should have been impossible to dodge. How? He demanded. Their engines are primitive. Their sensors are basic. How did they know where our shots would land? His officers had no answer. The truth was something Zeth Karan could not understand because he had never experienced it. The Velkari had spent 10,000 years winning. Their ships were built for victory against weaker enemies. Their tactics assumed they would always have more ships, better weapons, and superior technology. They had never needed to learn how to survive against impossible odds. Humans had learned nothing else. Captain Vasquez had not known exactly where the plasma would go, but she had known it was coming. 22 years of combat had taught her to feel the rhythm of battle, to sense when an enemy was about to fire, and guess where they would aim. It was not magic, it was experience. The kind of experience that only came from fighting enemies who wanted to kill you and almost succeeded. The Ironclad's crew worked together like parts of a single machine. Helmsman Torres anticipated Vasquez's orders before she gave them, adjusting the ship's course based on decades of serving together. Tactical Officer Park tracked enemy movements and fed targeting data to the weapons crews without needing to be told. Engineer Rodriguez managed power distribution across failing systems, keeping everything running through sheer force of will. "Return fire," Vasquez ordered. "Forward batteries, target the lead destroyer." The Ironclad's railguns spoke. They were not elegant weapons. They did not fire beautiful streams of energy. They fired chunks of tungsten metal, each one the size of a person's fist, accelerated to incredible speeds by electromagnetic coils. Simple, brutal, ancient by galactic standards, and absolutely devastating. The first destroyer's shields were designed to dissipate energy, plasma, lasers, particle beams. They could handle all of these by spreading the impact across their entire surface. But the tungsten slugs were not energy. They were mass, dense, heavy, moving at a significant fraction of the speed of light. The shields flickered and sparked as they tried to stop something they were never built to stop. The first few slugs lost most of their speed, but the barrier weakened with each hit. Then the fourth slug punched through and struck the destroyer's hull directly. The ship broke apart. Velkari emergency broadcasts filled the communication channels. Escape pods launched into space, carrying survivors who could not believe what had just happened. Their ship, a proud vessel of the Dominion, equipped with the finest technology in the galaxy, had been destroyed by a weapon their ancestors had abandoned as worthless. "They throw rocks," Zeth Karan had said. He was right. Humans threw rocks, and those rocks killed. The Velkari fleet adjusted their formation, spreading out to avoid being caught in the same crossfire. But this created gaps in their coverage, spaces that the Ironclad could exploit. Vasquez pushed her ship into those gaps, weaving between enemy vessels, staying too close for them to fire without risking hits on their own allies. "They're adapting," Park reported from Tactical, "changing their shield frequencies, trying to compensate for kinetic impacts." "Then we adapt faster," Vasquez replied. "Switch to armor-piercing rounds. Target their engine sections." The battle became a deadly dance. The Velkari had numbers and firepower. The ironclad had experience and desperation. Both sides learned from each exchange, but the humans learned faster. This was the difference that Zethkaran could not see. His fleet had trained for war, but they had never truly fought one. Their victories had always come from overwhelming force, never from skill or cunning. They had never faced an enemy who refused to die when they were supposed to. Humanity had spent its entire history fighting itself. The Martian Rebellion, the Belt Wars, the corporate conflicts, the religious crusades, thousands of years of warfare, each generation passing down the lessons learned in blood to the next. Not how to win with superior numbers, but how to survive without them. The ironclad had been built with those lessons in mind. Her armor was layered, not smooth, so that damage to one section would not spread to others. Her systems were redundant, 3 backups for every critical function, because her designers assumed that things would break and planned accordingly. Her weapons were simple because simple things were easier to repair, easier to modify, easier to keep working when everything was falling apart. And her crew trained for exactly this situation. Not victory against a superior force, that was impossible. Survival against one, that was the goal. Stay alive long enough to hurt the enemy, make them pay for every meter of space, make them regret ever starting the fight. Another Valkyrie destroyer fell, then another, then a fourth. Warning alarms screamed across the ironclad's bridge. A plasma blast had finally connected, punching through the weakened shields and striking the port side of the ship. Fires erupted in sections 3 and 4. Atmosphere began venting from a breach in the outer hull. "Damage report," Vasquez demanded. "Port weapons bay is gone," Park reported, his voice tight. "We've lost 12 crew. Emergency bulkheads are holding. Fires contained. 12 people dead. People she had served with for years, friends, family." Vasquez allowed herself one moment of grief, one heartbeat of pain. Then she pushed it aside. She could mourn later, if there was a later. Right now she had a battle to fight. Reroute power from port weapons to the forward array. Keep firing. The ironclad limped and burned, but she kept moving, kept fighting, kept surviving. Zethkaran watched his tactical display and saw something he had never seen before. The human ship was losing. There was no question of that. She was outgunned and outmatched. She would eventually fall. But she was taking his fleet apart piece by piece while she did it. 6 destroyers gone, then 8, then 10. For the first time in 300 years of command, High Admiral Zethkaran began to feel afraid. High Admiral Zethkaran stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching his fleet die around him. 15 destroyers gone now. 15 of the finest warships in the Dominion, reduced to burning wreckage by a single human vessel that should have been destroyed in the first volley. He did not understand how this was happening. The human ship was crippled. Half her weapons were offline. Fires burned across her hull, visible even from this distance. Atmosphere leaked from a dozen breaches. His sensors showed critical damage to her engine systems, her power grid, her life support. By every measure the Valkyrie used, she was already dead. But she kept fighting. Every time his captains thought they had her cornered, she found a way to escape. Every time they adapted to her tactics, she changed them. She used the debris of destroyed vessels as cover, hiding behind the remains of ships she had killed. She exploited the gaps in his formation, turning his own numbers against him. And through it all, her guns never stopped firing. "Concentrate all remaining vessels on the target," Zethkaran ordered. "I want every ship focused on that human. No more individual attacks. Hit her all at once, from every angle. She cannot dodge 25 ships firing together." His remaining captains acknowledged the order. The Valkyrie fleet reformed, pulling back from their spread formation to a tight sphere around the wounded ironclad. This time there would be no gaps, no escape routes, just overwhelming firepower from every direction. On the ironclad's bridge, Lieutenant Commander Park watched the enemy movements on his tactical display. "They're surrounding us again, Captain. Tighter formation this time. No blind spots." Captain Vasquez nodded slowly. She had expected this. It was the smart move, the only move, really. If she were in Zethkaran's position, she would do the same thing. "Time to target lock?" she asked. 30 seconds, maybe less. 30 seconds. That was how long they had before 25 warships opened fire at once. Even the ironclad could not survive that kind of barrage. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. Vasquez turned to face her crew. They looked back at her with calm, steady eyes. They knew what was coming. They knew they were probably going to die, and they were ready. "All hands," she said quietly. "It's been an honor serving with you." No one replied with words. They did not need to. 22 years together had said everything that needed to be said. Vasquez turned back to the viewport and made her decision. "All stop. Kill the engines." Helmsman Torres hesitated for just a moment before following the order. The ironclad's engines fell silent and the ship began to drift. To anyone watching, she looked like a vessel that had finally given up, crippled, burning, waiting to die. "Captain?" Park asked carefully. "Power down all weapons except the main gun." Now Park's eyes widened. The main gun. He had almost forgotten about it. Everyone had almost forgotten about it. Even the Valkyrie, who had scanned the ironclad so carefully before the battle, had dismissed it as useless. The main gun was a relic from an earlier age of human warfare. A massive electromagnetic mass driver mounted in the center of the ship's forward section. It could accelerate a solid iron projectile to nearly 5% of the speed of light, fast enough to punch through almost anything. But it had limitations that made it worthless in modern combat. It required enormous amounts of power, enough to drain the entire ship's reserves. It needed 30 seconds to charge. And worst of all, the ship had to point directly at its target to fire, making any evasive movement impossible. In a normal battle, against a normal enemy, no captain would ever use such a weapon. It was suicide. You would be a sitting target while you charged it, and even if you hit, you would only destroy one enemy ship. But this was not a normal battle, and Captain Elena Vasquez was not a normal captain. "Divert all power to the main gun," she ordered. "Everything we have. Life support, shields, secondary systems, all of it." Chief Engineer Rodriguez's voice came through the comm, strained but steady. "Captain, if we do that, we'll have maybe 3 minutes of air left on the bridge, and no shields. One hit and we're done." "I know, Sophia. Do it anyway." A long pause, then, "Understood. Channeling all available power to forward mass driver. Charge time, 28 seconds." The lights on the bridge dimmed as power drained away to the weapon. The gentle hum of the life support systems fell silent. The artificial gravity weakened, and Vasquez felt herself become lighter in her chair. The Valkyrie fleet finished their encirclement. 25 ships arranged in a perfect sphere around the drifting ironclad. Their weapons glowed bright as they prepared to fire. On Zeth Karan's flagship, tactical officers reported that the human ship had stopped moving. Her engines were offline. Her weapons appeared to be powering down. She was either surrendering or too damaged to continue. "Finally," Zeth Karan said, "the humans accept the inevitable." But something nagged at him. Some instinct, buried deep, that warned him not to celebrate too soon. The human captain had fought too hard, too well to simply give up now. What was she planning? He studied the human ship more closely. She was pointing directly at his formation. Her bow faced the center of the Valkyrie sphere, where 3 destroyers clustered close together. Wait, what was that glow in her forward section? "Sir," one of his tactical officers shouted. "Energy buildup detected in the human ship's bow. Unknown weapon charging." Zethkran felt a chill run through his body. "All ships, fire! Fire now!" But it was too late. On the ironclad's bridge, a single readout showed 100% charge on the main weapon. Chief Rodriguez's voice came through one final time. "Ready, Captain. It's all or nothing." Vasquez stared through the viewport at the Valkyrie ships, at the glowing weapons that were about to kill her and everyone she loved. She thought about Earth, about all the people back home who were counting on them, about the message this moment would send to the galaxy. Humanity does not surrender. Humanity does not break. And when you back us into a corner, God help you for what comes next. "Fire!" The main gun spoke. It made no sound in the vacuum of space, but everyone on the ironclad felt it. A deep vibration that shook the ship to her core, like a giant's heartbeat. The weapon consumed every last bit of power the ship had, plunging the bridge into darkness for one terrible moment. Then there was light. The iron slug, a solid mass the size of a small vehicle, crossed the distance between the ironclad and the nearest Valkyrie destroyer in less than a second. It hit the ship's shields and tore through them like they were made of paper. It struck the hull and kept going, punching clean through the vessel from bow to stern. And it did not stop. The slug, still carrying unimaginable momentum, struck the second destroyer behind the first, then the third, then a fourth, a fifth, a sixth. 6 ships died in the span of 2 heartbeats. They did not explode gracefully. They simply came apart, their hulls torn open by a force they were never designed to withstand. The remaining Valkyrie ships opened fire. Plasma bolts struck the ironclad's unshielded hull, tearing through armor and bulkheads. Explosions ripped through the ship's interior. Good people died in fire and vacuum, but it did not matter anymore. The sphere formation was broken. The Valkyrie fleet was in chaos, ships scattering to avoid the debris of their fallen comrades. Their perfect attack had become a panicked scramble for survival, and the ironclad somehow, impossibly, was still alive. Emergency power flickered back online. Red emergency lights bathed the bridge in crimson. Captain Vasquez coughed smoke from her lungs and pulled herself back into her chair. "Damage report," she rasped. "We're barely holding together," Park replied, blood running from a cut on his forehead. "But we're holding." Outside, 19 Valkyrie ships remained. 19 ships that had just watched a single human vessel destroy half their remaining fleet with one shot. Captain Vasquez looked at the chaos she had created and smiled. "Let's finish this." The battle that followed was not a battle at all. It was a hunt. The Valkyrie fleet had been broken by the main gun's devastating attack. Their perfect formation was gone, their confidence shattered. Ships that had never known defeat were now scrambling to survive against a wounded enemy they should have destroyed hours ago. Captain Vasquez gave them no mercy. The ironclad was dying. Everyone aboard knew it. Half her decks were open to space. Her engines stuttered and failed every few minutes. Her weapon systems kept overheating and shutting down, but she kept moving, kept fighting, kept killing. Ship by ship, the Valkyrie fell. Some tried to fight back. They regrouped and launched counterattacks, but their heart was no longer in it. They had come here expecting an easy victory, a simple demonstration of dominance over a primitive species. Now they were dying, and they could not understand why. Some tried to run. They turned their ships away from the battle, pushing their engines to maximum power, desperate to escape this nightmare. But the ironclad followed them, her wounded engines somehow finding enough strength to keep pace. Running did not save them. High Admiral Zethkaran watched from his flagship as his fleet was destroyed around him. He had tried to retreat 3 times now. Each time, the human ship had cut off his escape route, herding him back toward the battle like a predator playing with wounded prey. He understood now what he was facing. Not a primitive species, not easy victims. Something far more dangerous. Survivors. The humans had built their entire civilization on survival. They had fought wars that lasted generations. They had faced extinction again and again and refused to accept it. They had turned struggle into strength, hardship into power, and he had laughed at them. "All remaining ships," he broadcast, his voice hollow, "focus fire on the human vessel. Everything we have. Kill it or die trying." 7 ships remained, 7 against 1. By any calculation, those odds should still favor the Valkyrie, but Zethkaran no longer believed in calculations. He no longer believed in anything except the terrible certainty that he was going to die here. The 7 ships attacked together. It was a desperate charge, all of them rushing toward the ironclad at once, weapons firing continuously. Some of those shots struck home. More explosions tore through the human ship. More atmosphere vented into space. More systems failed. But the ironclad did not stop. Her railguns fired until their barrels glowed white-hot. Her missiles launched until the magazines were empty. Her point defense systems shot down incoming fire until they overheated and died. And through it all, her crew fought with calm, professional determination, never panicking, never giving up. Lieutenant Commander Park fell when a console exploded beside him. shrapnel tearing through his shoulder. Ensign Martinez took his place without being ordered, picking up where he left off. Chief Rodriguez's voice came through the comm less and less often, her engineering team fighting fires and sealing breaches throughout the ship. Dr. Hassan's medical bay filled with wounded, then overflowed into the hallways. Captain Vasquez remained on the bridge, giving orders, making decisions, keeping her ship alive through sheer force of will. Blood soaked her uniform from wounds she did not remember receiving. Smoke filled her lungs with every breath. Her vision blurred from exhaustion and pain. But she did not stop. She could not stop, not until this was finished. The seventh ship fell, then the sixth, then the fifth. When only 3 remained, including Zeth Karan's flagship, the remaining Velkari captains finally broke. They turned and fled, abandoning their High Admiral, choosing survival over honor. The ironclad let them go. There was no need to chase them anymore. The message had been sent. The galaxy had witnessed everything. Every species watching knew what humanity was capable of now. Only Zeth Karan's flagship remained. The High Admiral sat alone on his bridge. His officers had abandoned their posts, some fleeing to escape pods, others simply giving up. He remained because he could not bring himself to leave. This was his fleet, his responsibility, his failure. When the ironclad's communication screen lit up with an incoming transmission, he accepted it. Captain Vasquez appeared on his screen. She looked barely alive. Her face was pale and streaked with blood. Her eyes were red from smoke and exhaustion. Behind her, her bridge was a ruin of sparking consoles and emergency lighting. But she was still there, still commanding, still fighting. "High Admiral," she said quietly, "it's over." Zeth Karan stared at her for a long moment. "How?" he asked finally. "How is this possible? 40 ships, 10,000 years of dominance. How could one broken vessel defeat all of that?" Vasquez considered the question. She could have said many things. She could have spoken about human resilience, about the lessons learned through centuries of warfare, about the spirit that refused to surrender no matter the odds. Instead, she said simply, "You laughed at us." The transmission ended. Zeth Karan's flagship died 3 minutes later. A single railgun round, one of the last the ironclad had remaining, pierced the bridge and ended the High Admiral's long career. Then there was silence. The ironclad drifted among the wreckage of 40 Velkari warships. Fires burned across her hull. Emergency systems beeped and wailed. The ship was dying, no question about it. She had perhaps an hour of life support remaining, maybe less. But she was still here. Captain Vasquez slumped in her chair, too tired to move. Around her, the survivors of her crew gathered on the bridge, supporting each other, tending to wounds, simply being together. They had lost 31 people in the battle, 31 friends, family members, heroes who had given everything to protect their home. But 57 had entered this battle. 26 remained. 26 survivors who had just announced humanity's arrival to the galaxy in a way that would never be forgotten. The communication console crackled with incoming transmissions. The galactic observers, representatives from dozens of species, were all trying to contact the ironclad at once. Their messages ranged from shock to disbelief to fear. One message from a small species called the Cathari simply said, "Welcome to the galaxy, humans. We would like to be your friends." Vasquez smiled weakly at that. Over the following hours, rescue ships arrived from the space station. They brought medical teams, repair crews, and diplomats eager to speak with the humans who had just changed the balance of power in the galaxy. The Velkari Dominion, it emerged, had never lost a battle. Not once in 10,000 years. Their reputation for invincibility was the foundation of their empire. Every species they had conquered had submitted because resistance seemed pointless against such overwhelming power. That foundation was now broken. News of the battle spread across the galaxy at the speed of light. Species that had lived under Velkari rule for generations began to question their servitude. Rebellions sparked on a dozen worlds. The Dominion, faced with crumbling authority and a humiliating defeat, was forced to turn inward to maintain control of its existing territory. Earth was left alone. The ironclad eventually returned home. She was towed most of the way, her engines too damaged to make the journey under her own power. When she arrived in Earth orbit, she was greeted by every ship the human fleet possessed, forming an honor guard for the battered veteran. They offered to retire her, to put her in a museum, a monument to humanity's greatest victory. Captain Vasquez refused. "She's not finished yet," she said. "Neither are we." The ironclad was repaired, upgraded, made stronger than ever before. But they kept her scars, the marks of every battle she had survived. They were part of her now, part of what made her who she was. And across the galaxy, species began to tell stories about the humans. Not about their technology, which was primitive. Not about their numbers, which were few, but about their spirit, their refusal to give up, their ability to survive anything and come back stronger. They told stories about an old, tired warship that faced impossible odds and won, about a captain who dared to defy an empire, about a crew who fought not for conquest, but for their home. They told stories about the day the Valkyrie laughed at humanity, and the day humanity stopped laughing back. In her quarters aboard the restored ironclad, Captain Elena Vasquez sat alone with her thoughts. She looked out her window at the stars, at the vast galaxy that now knew who humans were. "They'll come again," she said to herself. "The Valkyrie. Someone else. Someone always comes." She stood up and straightened her uniform. "And we'll be ready." The ironclad hummed around her, old engines singing their familiar song. 60 years of service, and still going strong. Still surviving, still fighting, just like humanity itself.